Thank you for joining us. My name is Anita Kibunguchy, and I'm a product marketing manager for data and analytics, and I'm part of the Google Cloud Platform group. And today we have a really exciting panel. I'll just do a quick introduction. I have Jordan here. He's an engineering director for GCP. And then we have Sudhir. He's a director of product management for GCP. And then we have Matt, who's the research director, data platforms and analytics for 451 Research. Welcome, gentlemen. So would like to make this session interactive. So we have a couple mics here in the room. If you have any questions or any comments, then just feel free to step up and get on the mic, and then we'll give you a podium. Okay, so let's get started. So we know that data is becoming one of the most valuable assets for an organization. It's not surprising because I feel like it's one of the things you've probably heard over and over again at this conference. And you've also heard this term that says data is the new oil. So let's start with you, Matt. How would you interpret this statement, and how should customers think about their data and also data analytics in this environment?
Sure, thanks, Anita, and thank you everyone for coming to this session. Just to give you a bit of background, so I'm Matt Azza, I'm the Research Director for Data Platforms and Analytics at 451 Research. We're an industry analyst firm covering the entire industry, but the channel, as we call it, that I look after, covers everything from back-end data platforms through to front-end analytics and machine learning and AI. There's a team of us doing that, but I'm responsible for the overall coverage. So, obviously, data and the value of data is something we've been looking at for, all number of years. And I think it's interesting when we talk about companies suddenly sort of discovering the value of data. Obviously, this has been happening for thousands of years. Companies hopefully have been making decisions based on data. But I think what we see is changing is, I'm not convinced by data is the new oil, but let's not get into that. But definitely what we do see is that companies are wanting to become more data-driven. And we could say data is definitely the fuel for innovation within organizations, and particularly, we're going for the buzzwords, let's chuck in digital transformation as well.
Right.
As companies are looking to transform, become more responsive to their customers, they see that data and analytics is the fuel that enables them to do that. There's various aspects in which, ways in which organizations can take advantage of that. Well, we'll get into those in more detail, so perhaps for now I'll stop there and let you comment on data is the new oil, or take it where you want to go.
No, I agree. I think as we talk to more and more customers, they all want to be more data-driven, have a data-driven culture, and have tools that are easy to go ahead and leverage this data in day-to-day decision-making. And I think that's the key thing that I hear all the time from customers.
That is so true. Jordan, anything?
One thing to add, it's also really key that you have data that you can trust. So if your data is not trustworthy and you're trying to make decisions based on it, you're going to make terrible decisions. And so sometimes we see there's not a data cleaning process, or people just don't really understand the data well enough. And that if you don't understand your data well enough, then you're going to use it poorly.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. So we know that consumerization is one of the key drivers for growth in data. And when I say consumerization, if you think about it, I mean the number of cut videos that people are actually recording, just have recorded so far and are continuing to record, right? I mean, if you think about just the amount of social media posts, the connected homes, right, with Internet of Things. And I think IDC has an interesting statistics, and I think you mentioned this, Sudhir, yesterday. I think they're looking at 163 zettabytes of data by 2025. I mean, if you ask me, I can't even imagine how much data that is, right? Or even just to think about it. So, Matt, in your research, just curious, what are customers looking for in a data analytics product with just this amount of growth in data?
Yeah, I think it's actually multiple things. I mean, clearly the volume of data is significant, absolutely. And also, as you mentioned, data coming from new sources, or actually organizations taking advantage of data that they already had, but perhaps it wasn't economically viable to store and process before. Hence, we saw the emergence of Hadoop and NoSQL, but then cloud storage as well to deal with that. And then obviously IoT is generating even more data. But there are other aspects to it as well. I mean, we see a lot of organizations, there's been a lot of talk the last couple of days about democratization of data, or at least self-service access to data, putting data in the hands of more business users and decision makers. And that is all tied in with, this thing about being data driven, getting data and analytics into the heart of the business, not just for a select few within the organization who make decisions. So in terms of what organizations are looking for, all of that. But as cheaply as possible,
Yes.
and as flexibly as possible. So there's multiple things, and there's what I think is, clearly is there's a huge range of different products and services that organisations can use for different purposes, and it's all then you get into the nuances of the application, and I think that's something because there's been so much innovation and technology in this space in the last few years, sometimes it's easy to forget you have to start with the business case. What are you trying to achieve, and then figure out which technology can help you deliver on that.
Yeah, good point.
Just one more thing to add here, right? A lot of customers, when they look at that number, like
I know, right?
163, it's like massive number. And a lot of times what they think about is, but my data is not that big today. The thing that customers need is scalable platforms that can scale to what data sets they have today, but also ability to scale over a period of time when the data grows. One of the things we are noticing with all the customers that have been using, for example, Bigquery for a while is, as they start to see value in data, they collect more and more. I think traditional data warehouses have this problem where they all teach people to cleanse, reduce, aggregate, store. The whole idea is, how do you not get more data? It's like you reduce your cost by aggregating, pre-aggregating, cleansing, and all of that. Versus what cloud platforms allow you to do is collect first and then analyze, figure out what's valuable. And that's where actually the real value comes in. We have customers that have literally had 100x growth in real-time data they were collecting from just within a year to 18 months, just because they were started getting value out of the data sets that they started collecting. So I would say, from a product perspective, focusing on not just what you need today, but there are a lot of things that on-premises systems restrict you from. As you think about cloud, it is the scalable infrastructure that's there. So look at how you can leverage data in a different way. Bet on like scalable platforms that will allow you to go ahead and analyze maximum amount of data that you can collect.
And so this question is for you, Jordan, which I think is very interesting. Given the massive amounts of data, and then also given what we're investing in, how can you explain how GCP is thinking about data analytics and this innovation? It'd be interesting to just give the audience a little bit of a purview into just the span of products we have to help with data analytics.
Sure. Well, I think one of the things we want to do is we don't want to be sort of just another cloud, particularly with regard to data analytics. We have some of the best infrastructure, some of the best technology in the world, and we want to really continue to innovate and not just sort of rest on our laurels. So, as Sudhir was alluding to, like, we don't want to sort of just be a data warehouse. We want to be an amazing data warehouse, but we also want to sort of push the boundaries. Like, what format is your data in? Is your data all large data sets are generally streaming data sets. So how do we process the data in a natural streaming format? And I think Google has been a good thought leader in streaming systems. And so how do we kind of drive on that? Also, how do we take our advantages in infrastructure and kind of apply those to things that nobody else can do? To give it a good example of that, one of the things we announced yesterday was the geospatial features in Bigquery. And so, okay, Postgres has some geospatial features. But one of the things that this is going to enable you to do is going to enable you to join 1 billion data points in one table with 1 billion data points in another table to find the points that are like within a certain radius of each other. That's a cross join of 1 billion by 1 billion points. Like, really nobody can do that except Google, and we want to just sort of continue to apply those kinds of technologies and those kinds of like smarts to the things that we're building.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to add,
Yeah.
To add one more thing to that, the other side we are very focused on also is just simplifying the use of these kind of tools that we're building. One is scaling is super important, but ease of use is really important for us. Some of the capabilities that we announced in this week, one of them was actually ability to directly, the new BigQuery UI, it's snappy and all of that, but the most interesting thing there is you can now run that query that Jordan was talking about with a one click, you can actually transfer that into a Data Studio visualization tool and actually visualize it, explore it, and then create a report out of it, just with one click. The other thing you can do is with the Sheets integration that we announced, you can go in Sheets, use a BigQuery connector, fire a similar kind of query, move the data into Sheets, and then just use that experience that all your users are already familiar with to analyze that kind of data, visualize it. So ease of use is another side of things which is super important for customers that we focus on.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about BigQuery, we actually have a showcase in Moscone South, and I'm actually going to be there manning the booth from 12:30 to about 3 o'clock. So we actually are showcasing the new UI, so just a shameless plug there. But, so thank you so much. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit. One of the things that we keep hearing from a lot of our customers is this idea of adopting a multi-cloud strategy, right? The fact that no longer are customers just using one cloud, but pretty much multiple clouds for different workloads for different reasons, right? And what I'd love to hear from you, Matt, in your research, what are you seeing happen in the industry, and what do you think is driving this adoption?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely real and definitely happening. What's interesting, if you said, what's driving the adoption initially, so we see, amongst surveying our user base, something like 60% of cloud adopters are using multiple clouds.
It's a
A
big
lot
number,
of them have ended up using multiple clouds completely by accident because they've got different groups in the organization that have used different clouds for different purposes. Shadow IT have just spun up things and just sort of stumbled into this world of having multiple clouds. And that's, not something that is necessarily sort of viable in the long term. So what we see increasingly as organizations doing is, hybrid cloud is a term that's used by different people for different reasons. We use that to talk about companies actually strategically, deliberately using multiple clouds, specifically to support a single application or workload. And so what we see is increasingly organizations are deliberately doing that. Actually, of that sort of 60% who are using multiple clouds, about 70% are either already using multiple clouds to deliver a single application or are considering or are working towards that. And so increasingly, as I say, it's just going to be the norm. And it's then about not, comparing different cloud providers at a very high level, very strategically looking at different technologies individually and how you can combine them to deliver a better complete whole. A great example of that would be, existing applications, they're already running up there in one cloud, but I don't know, you want to take advantage of, some visual analysis, machine learning, or speech analysis, machine learning, and it could be a service on another cloud is the best choice for that. So, call out to that for that very specific purpose to deliver that combined entity. So we see many organizations are increasingly strategically, deliberately looking to do that, as opposed to just sort of stumbling into the case of having multiple clouds.
Yeah, good point. Anything you want to add, Sudhir?
Yeah, so the other thing is multi-cloud is one, and we fundamentally believe most of the investments today for customers are on premises. And so having this hybrid scenario where most customers will be in a multi-cloud or on-premises and cloud pattern. So this is why if you looked at the keynotes the first 2 days, the focus on being an open cloud and ability for you to run your workloads in multiple clouds, enabling that kind of capability is super important for us. Ability to run your Spark workloads, whether you're running on-premises, in cloud. With Beam, what we're doing, having the same code that can run with Dataflow, but also run with Spark or Flink, super important for us. So we're focusing a lot on standardization, supporting standard SQL is part of that whole initiative for us. Super important. And also Composer, which is Airflow. We're taking open source technology, making it available for customers to use. And you can use Airflow or Composer now to go ahead and have orchestration that can span across clouds, on premises, all of that, and you can centrally manage it. So yes, the open cloud initiative is key driver because of the requirement that customers have that spans across multiple clouds and that. So
yeah, absolutely. And then from like a workload perspective, what are you seeing customers sort of like keep on-prem versus like on the cloud? Is there a difference?
Every customer is different. People are going to choose what best technologies that they need for their scenarios. What I am noticing is from a Google Cloud perspective, data analytics, machine learning is our key differentiator. And we see a lot of times customers first try out those services on Google, and then they go adopt other areas and stuff like that. So I do see a lot of customers starting with data analytics on one cloud. They do have different workloads that run in different places. A lot of people run their operational systems on premises, maybe in other clouds. But for analytics, machine learning, I think we have highly differentiated services.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of announcements.
Enables them to leverage these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Add to that. Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're increasingly seeing, obviously, as you said, the vast majority of workloads still run on premises, particularly data and analytics workloads. But what we've seen, in the surveys that we do is, if we look at which are the most popular applications or workloads in the cloud, obviously database and analytics are widely popular applications. So they were always there or thereabouts, but they were always somewhat further down the list. In the last couple of years, they've been increasing, and now I think the last one we did at the start of this year, databases was number one, analytics was number two, as you would expect, given the wide adoption of those workloads. But it does speak to, I think, the increasing maturity of adoption in relation to the cloud. But you're right. A key point is, there are a huge amount of workloads that will either remain on premises or will be, we tend to think about lifting and shifting workloads to the cloud. And actually, most of the time that doesn't happen. It's about refactoring or redesigning the applications for the new version of that running in the cloud in a modern architecture, taking advantage of newer capabilities. So we see a lot more of that going on. And so in some ways, it will take a long time for some of the changes to become obvious, because a lot of those workloads will continue on premises and slowly be retired. And so, the shift is, it's a fundamental shift, but it's actually happening in some cases relatively slowly.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, of course. Go ahead, Jordan.
Just in terms of you mentioned that lift and shift is not necessarily something that people are doing or they're not starting with. I think what we often see is people have a problem, and that problem may not be their central data warehousing or database team, but it may just be a team that is not getting the numbers they want fast enough. And so they pull that into the cloud, and then people start seeing, hey, wow, we get these amazing numbers super quickly, and they start kind of, it's like a thread in a sweater that just sort of pulls more and more into it. And then eventually the data warehousing team is like, hey, we can, all our data's there already, why don't we just, move the rest of our workloads?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things you gentlemen have mentioned earlier was just this idea again of just the massive amounts of data, and it starts to make sense that, for organizations, it's easier to have all your data in one place and then to start to do analytics, right? And so that's definitely another push.
Just one more thing, just in that same realm. So this is exactly why, from a product perspective, we have invested in data transfer service. So if you think about it, a lot of customers spend a lot of money with Google on advertising and different things. And our thing was, this is a completely different audience. It's not a data warehousing audience, but it is the marketing analysts that need to go ahead and analyze their spend, optimize their spend. How do you do better for marketing analytics? And so we basically launched data transfer service. Was like, hey, with few clicks, you can get your AdWords data, double-click data, all of this data into Bigquery, and you can analyze it. We have seen amazing amount of adoption for this. Customers who are not traditionally GCP customers, knowing this, they're like, okay, let me with few clicks pull data in, start analyzing it, visualizing it. They're creating these reports in Data Studio, sharing it across the organization, and suddenly, as Jordan was saying, you get this whole community started forming in organizations that started using it, and then it pulls through the whole thing. So.
Okay, great. Again, guys, we have a couple mics, so if you have any questions or if you have any comments, just feel free to come to one of the mics. Okay, so we'll switch gears again just a little bit. I think one of the things that I've heard in this conference over and over again is this idea of just open source and open source architecture, right? And just Sudhir, quickly, what are you hearing from our customers about open source technologies, and how are they appreciating what Google Cloud is doing?
Yeah, I think open source is super critical. As I talk to customers, this ability, just because of hybrid and multi-cloud scenarios, ability for them to run their workloads across and having that option of running them anywhere else is super important to them. This is why, as I was saying, our investment in Beam is so important for our customers. Is like when they love data flow. Like once customers start leveraging data flow for large-scale data processing, I hope they never go away, but that option always exists is, hey, with Beam being open source and runners being available in different engines, they can actually do that. So that's super important for them. It resonates really well with CIOs and all. Similarly, as I was saying, a lot of customers already have huge deployments of Hadoop, Spark on premises. Airflow is amazing. Composer, it's very fascinating for me. Composer in its private beta or private alpha we had.
Private alpha. Yeah.
Private alpha. It was like 1,000 customers. I have no idea how products get to 1,000 customers with being private.
Yeah.
But it was because Airflow, which is like the orchestration tool, Apache project, everybody loved it already. So we just enabled that on the platform and the adoption was crazy. So this just supporting open source, being an open cloud, enabling experiences that can come from those is super important for
And Composer GA, is that correct?
Yeah, we launched Composer to GA now, so.
Yeah. Would love to hear your thoughts, Matt, on just open source and open source technology.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually, so I joined 451 Research about 10 and a bit years ago. I can remember back that far. And actually, at that time, we had an open source practice because open source was relatively new and different, and a lot of companies were still trying to figure out what it meant. And so we would work with clients, both on the enterprise side and the vendor side, just to help them figure that out. Obviously, over time, it became more normalized, and it's just part of everything we do. But what's been fascinating is, over that time to see the approach to open source change. I mean, people used to say you won't get fired for buying IBM. I definitely think now you won't get fired for buying open source. It's that insurance policy that organizations have. And in most of the, engagement we do with clients, and they're looking at different products and vendors, it's definitely, it's not always a deal breaker, but it's always there in the mix, like they would default to open if they can. And actually, I had a conversation with a Google Cloud customer the other day here, which proved the value of that. I can't say who it was, but a very happy Google Cloud customer. But for one reason or another, their Stackdriver costs suddenly went absolutely through the roof. And so what they decided to do was, just for a brief period, while they figure out what's going on, stop that, switch to open source. Obviously, they had the skills to be able to do this.
Yeah.
But they could do that. They could just switch to open source, do it themselves because it's open source. And it's that, it's a one-off thing. They'll probably go back, to using the hosted version. But it just was, that benefit that gives people the choice to change how they deploy and manage that, depending on, whatever happens in the future. And it's a little bit of, insurance policy, basically.
Yeah.